Welcome to Hope Blooms, a podcast from the Early Pregnancy Loss Association.
At EPLA, we seek to support women and families suffering early pregnancy loss by providing resources, education, and community. It is our vision that no one suffers miscarriage alone. Welcome back to Hope Blooms. I'm Emily Carrington, the Executive Director of EPLA. And with me today, we have a special guest and fill-in co-host, Steph Gordon. Welcome, Steph. We're happy to have you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Steph is filling in while Maria is on maternity leave, but we're excited to take this opportunity to get to know Steph a little more. She's one of our board members and has been involved with the organization even before that. So I think it's appropriate for our first episode with Steph to give her a chance to tell her story. I know she's been on our blog. She's been a blog editor for us. She's written a lot for us. But I'd like you to just let's start with your story of loss, which led you here. So can you tell us a little bit about your miscarriage?
Yeah. So my miscarriage, I should say our miscarriage, happened in 2012. It was funny because I was talking to my husband this past weekend about being on this podcast and sharing our loss story. And it feels like so much time has gone by, but you also remember every single moment from that loss, even though it's been 11 years now.
Yeah.
So I feel like I probably have a very typical miscarriage story in that I was experiencing some bleeding, which caused concern. And then, we took the proper steps to address the issue, which was miscarriage. So
Was this your first pregnancy?
correct.
And how far along were you?
So I was 10 weeks along. So having lost my first pregnancy was also very emotional, I guess you could say. But let's go back to my story.
Yeah.
So I was about 10 weeks along and I had noticed some spotting, which I thought, okay, this is a normal thing. A lot of women experience spotting during the early pregnancy months. And as the days went on during the week, the bleeding was getting heavier. So we had went to triage at the University of Michigan, which was where my doctor was. And I was carted back to this room, a very small room. And it was later in the evening. And I just remember going through routine, like getting my vitals, taking my temperature, and I had an ultrasound done, and they had also done some blood work. But after they were looking at the blood work, I was also escorted to have a transvaginal ultrasound, and that was kind of where my husband and I both knew that the baby didn't have a heartbeat. So the baby was measuring a little over 8 weeks. So I guess it took my body a little over a week to show those symptoms. And yeah, it was just kind of a shock, I guess. I mean, we were going through the motions, but also it was very heartbreaking at the same time, obviously. And so we went home and I made an appointment with my OB that following Monday. I think this was a Friday night. And I went in on Monday and she had confirmed that the baby was not alive. So we went over options, and she was a big blessing because she had also experienced loss. So that was very comforting to have somebody who could understand what I was going through. And I opted to take misoprostal at home. Because I wasn't, so 10 weeks, I could still do this at home. And so I remember waiting about a week because I was working at the time before I took those pills.
Mm.
And it was just really hard to let go.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to, like, I don't know if it sounds odd, but just hang on to that baby for as long as I could, even though I knew the baby wasn't alive.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's Friday, and I don't know, maybe it was Saturday. And we opted to, I took the pills and passed my baby at home. Which, looking back, I mean, there's no good way to, I don't know, have like complete a miscarriage.
Right.
I know the DNC was also an option for me, but I thought that doing it at home would be more personal for Matt and I. And it was, but it was also very, like, you just didn't know what to expect, I guess you could say, because you don't know how your body is going to react to the drug. So I probably had every symptom that was, listed, which is never, it was a long process. So I kept everything that was passed.
Were you prepared to do that? Did you know that you wanted to keep the body, or is that a decision you made?
Yeah, we knew we wanted to do that because, I mean, it just is very morbid to think like flushing a precious life.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So that was what we decided to do. And it just was, I don't know.
I think that week between knowing that the baby had died and sort of preparing to finally take the medicine, what you mentioned wanting to hold on to that baby. Sort of what do you think because I think there's everyone's experience is kind of different. I had some time with both of mine knowing that the baby had died and then actually passing the baby or having a surgery. But not everyone is sort of given that time, right? Some people, it's very quick. Having that week and sort of an ounce of control, right? Like it's not control. And honestly, your body could have delivered the baby at any time.
Right.
But having some tiny bit of control, what was sort of the grief process and thoughts and feelings sort of in that week?
Well, obviously, lots of grief and sadness and not understanding why or what. There was a lot of fear because it was our first pregnancy. So thinking like, is there a bigger issue here? So I guess it was just mostly heartbreak, but also, and just like thinking of what could have been, I guess, and just really like loving this person. And it was a lot of reflection and sadness. So I just took that week to just hang on to that life, even though they weren't
I think
alive.
That process is important. Did you tell people at work?
I did, yes. My boss was very understanding, which was great. Actually, a male boss. So it was great to be surrounded by support, which I don't know that every woman gets to experience that. So that was a big blessing.
Did you said you went to work. I did too. I mean, I
did.
I took some time off right after my diagnosis.
Yeah.
And then my timeline was a little different, but I like kept showing up and they were like, "What are you doing?" And I was like,
but it's kind of like losing a loved one of any kind. Sometimes it's best to kind of preoccupy yourself as well, like giving yourself space, but also trying to keep yourself
moving forward.
Yeah, moving forward.
Yeah. I found they were having some freedom. There were some things I needed to just get out among the living.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was some time I was really thankful. Did you take any time after?
I believe I took that Monday off because it was on the weekend. It was a really beautiful day. I do remember that. And after everything had passed, I remember Matt laying a blanket outside, and we were just sitting in the sun, like crying. I mean, it was this really like beautiful and sad moment.
Right.
But I just remember that. And I remember my parents bringing us dinner over later that evening. So just, there was a lot of love and support in the midst of so much sadness. And so with those remains, we kept our baby in the freezer for a while. And then Matt gifted me the following Mother's Day a tree that we had planted to remember and honor our baby. And we buried the baby underneath this. We call it our angel tree.
That's so sweet.
So, yeah, when we moved, I made sure that the person who moved the tree was like, but they were very respectful and very honoring of that. But yeah, it's very comforting to know that they're there with us in some way, and we can celebrate them.
Yes, and there's so little guidance. Our still most visited blog post every month is how to bury your miscarried baby. And there's just so little guidance, and sort of, we talk a lot about the script, right? Like, and people, we don't know what to do. There's many women who did flush their baby, and there's all these posts out there like, I flushed, oh my gosh. And then later you realize, like, why, how, what did I do? But in the moment you're just sort of shocked. And
Right.
I think I was really unprepared for my home miscarriage, and I was really unprepared for the reality of this, like, body. You know, I had my first miscarriage. I was told, like, yeah, it'll be sort of like an aggressive, heavy period. It really was not. And so there was just a lot that knowing, like, what to do, and then knowing the next thing to do. And you can, you know, I encourage people to look at that blog post. You can bury your children in cemeteries. There are ways forward. Our miscarriage care kits have the materials to collect the remains and to preserve the body. And I think that we just have to, it's gruesome and it's hard to talk about, but at the same time, I don't think we give dignity to life or our bodies if we aren't real about this.
Right.
And so you can, and I really encourage. I've not been able to bury myself in cemeteries. And hospitals also, like, they don't give good answers.
Right.
So, because they can't really tell you. I don't think they can tell you to bury it in your backyard. I don't know. I don't know. So hospitals are really useless. I think they're not useless in general. They're really useless when it comes to the how do I bury my baby problem.
Right.
And because that's not their problem.
And I think that was just like our personal choice, what we felt was right. And that might be different for everybody.
Right. But I think what you said about the comfort in knowing where they are is really hard and really beautiful. I was told the first time when I had a DNC, and not every hospital is this way, but when I said what would happen to the body, I was told that it would just go out with the medical waste.
Right.
And I was 27 and young, and it was my first pregnancy, so I just sort of shut up. I would be very different about that now. And I don't want to say this to discourage women. DNCs are sometimes very necessary.
Right.
And it was what my body needed at that time. But I really wish that the baby's body could have been given more respect. And some hospitals do.
And I feel like that's where I was so thankful for my doctor, because she recommended doing it at home because it would be in a more peaceful setting, even though it was not a peaceful process. But we also had the choice of doing what we wanted, essentially.
There's less. I've done it both ways, and it's traumatic no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's a better or worse way. I think it's under the guidance of a doctor with your health in mind. Like, there's risks with anything. Where you are, like I said, both emotionally, mentally, and physically, I feel like we did the right thing at the right time. So one time it was absolutely for my mental and physical health. I needed to do the DNC.
Yeah.
The second time I needed to be home.
It's just interesting because after I experienced doing this at home, I thought to myself, well, I would never do that again. Because it was just, it's very unexpected, even though like people can prepare you, your doctor can prepare you. You can, research online, but everybody's bodies are different and everybody's body will react in a different way. It's not streamlined,
Yeah.
I think one of the hardest parts for me after I had completed my miscarriage was going back for blood work. Did you have to do that?
Not after my first one.
Probably because I did it at home. But I had to go back every week and I had my blood drawn to confirm that my HCG levels
that it was complete.
Were going back. And I think that appointment every week was just awful. And it was like walking in, yes, I'm getting blood work done. And it just was, it was just a terrible reminder and just so sad.
Right.
So I think of like other women who have to do that, that's just, it's very lonely. And that's a big part of my miscarriage that I remember quite well.
You mentioned lonely. At the time, did you know many women who had also miscarried?
No. So I guess in our friend group, I had experienced pregnancy first. So I didn't really have anybody to turn to who had experienced miscarriage. I mean, I had obviously heard of miscarriage and I knew that miscarriage, is a possibility with every pregnancy, but I didn't think, oh, this is going to happen to me.
Right.
And then it does. So yeah, I would say it was a very lonely experience because not a lot of my friends, none of them had experienced miscarriage. And then, months go by and I'm still doing research. And then I find the Early Pregnancy Loss Association. And I remember telling Matt, I'm like, I would just like to make it a mission of mine to somehow help or support women who might be feeling lonely or, I don't know, just a listening ear or a voice to somebody who might not understand. In 2012, I mean, people weren't really talking about miscarriage even then.
No. I mean, our loss was in 2014. And it was shortly after that we started EPLA, which we technically were founded in 2016, but those conversations started in 15. And no, I cannot believe how much things have changed in 10 years. And I don't think it's just because we're in the center of it and we talk about it. I remember feeling like we told close friends. I remember feeling like I didn't know how to sort of announce it on Facebook, or did I need to, or I shouldn't. But also all my friends were starting to announce pregnancies, so I was 27. I'd been married for 4 years, so we weren't newlyweds, almost 5. But we had gotten married on the young side. So anyway, we were just entering in this time where every Facebook post was a pregnancy announcement.
And that's and I know this is also different for everybody, but that's also a sting, especially if you had just experienced loss.
Yeah.
For me, I don't know. I guess, like I said, it was my first pregnancy. So I just thought, oh, can I even have children? Which I've went on to have 3 beautiful, healthy children.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think I've seen, when I look back at the last 10 years, I think there's been generational shifts, right? I mean, we sort of came of age with Facebook. We invented Facebook, right?
Yes.
Our generation, right?
Yes.
And I see this sort of shift of like, we all started having babies. I was thinking about like, what's my silly, cute Facebook announcement for my baby going to be? Like that was something that was really important to me. And then didn't get to do. And, and now maybe that's dated. I don't know what the kids these days are doing. All my friends are, almost done having babies.
Right.
Or don't have time to make, cute, silly announcements. So, I think that there's been a shift in how we talk about it. And I just can't believe, though, now that we talk about it, how many women come out of the woodwork from other generations and who are willing and able to listen.
Right.
It is not like we're just in this echo chamber of millennials.
I also, after my miscarriage, I received this very sweet letter from my aunt who had had a few miscarriages. And I never knew about it.
Yeah.
And I believe I still have that letter in my drawer, but it was very comforting to me. And my grandma, she also lost a baby. This was back in, the 60s, and which was a very, very different time for miscarriage. So just hearing their stories and having some family support who understood was comforting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like my miscarriage was, I hate to say this, but very like textbook, like, around the 10-week mark. I don't know. There's just no pretty way to describe it.
Well, and I think it might be textbook and it might be common, but was your baby and your body and your experience. That doesn't make it any more, okay.
Right.
That we can find comfort in other people who've walked that trauma before. But, we don't just move past other deaths just because people die every day.
Right.
So I think it's important for us to say, like, it's okay. And it is common. And it is like hopefully textbook and not particularly traumatic.
Right.
But it's yours. And it's a big deal. And it changes the rest of your life.
Yeah. And in those moments of like learning, like, okay, I remember the doctor who was on call, she was like, oh, well, this pregnancy isn't viable, and it just is all very like cold, there's nothing really like,
right.
It's very straightforward. At least my experience was in learning that.
Right. Right.
We had lost our baby. So I just think the healing afterwards is there are very important moments. And for a mother, it's like, okay, accepting the loss, grieving the loss, and then moving forward. But every year we, remember our baby, and we have a pair of angel wings that we hang on our Christmas tree each year, and they sit toward the top of the tree. And we have our angel tree. And I just very much look forward to meeting this baby someday. Yes. And it's very comforting to know that will happen. And I think for me and other mothers who have lost kind of in the earlier stages of pregnancy, just not knowing, oh, was it a boy or a girl? So I just always wonder.
Yeah, it's hard
or like what it was.
Yeah, it's hard to know that child when there isn't much information. And that's one of the things to grieve, right? Like actually knowing. So. Well, Steph, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Such a pleasure to hear your story. And a big thank you to our listeners. This has been another episode of Hope Blooms. Thank you for listening to Hope Blooms, a podcast from the Early Pregnancy Loss Association.
To learn more about how we and you can support women suffering early pregnancy loss, visit our website at miscarriagecare.com or find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you for listening.